The chip war seems to have no end in sight. According to a report by Global Times, on October 12, the British media outlet Reuters stated that President Biden is considering closing a loophole in the export restrictions on chips to China that was announced last year. Reuters claims that although the United States has explicitly banned the export of artificial intelligence chips to China, some Chinese companies with operations in the United States can still purchase them. Consequently, Chinese companies can exploit this loophole by buying American chips and sending them back to China. In the near future, the United States is expected to further increase sanctions on chip exports to China, which may include Chinese companies with overseas operations on the list. In fact, this is not the first time the U.S. government has intensified restrictions on chip exports to China. Just recently, on September 22, the Office of the Chip Plan of the U.S. Department of Commerce issued the final fence rules for the Chip and Science Act. The rules emphasize two key points. First, all technology companies involved in the Chip and Science Act are prohibited from expanding semiconductor material production capacity in countries such as China and Russia for a period of 10 years. It should be noted that major chip giants such as Intel, Qualcomm, Nvidia, Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and TSMC have all participated in the Chip and Science Act and will also receive subsidies from the U.S. Chip Fund in the future. Just with this measure, the United States has essentially cut off China's possibility of obtaining cutting-edge chips from these top chip giants. The first provision targets China, while the second provision targets these chip giants. The regulations state that individuals and related companies that have received funding from the Chip Fund are restricted from engaging in joint research and technology licensing activities in China. It is worth mentioning that the Chip and Science Act, signed by Biden on August 9 last year, is worth $280 billion, with $200 billion allocated for scientific research and $52.7 billion deposited in the Chip Fund, which provides subsidies to all companies involved in the Chip and Science Act. In addition, Biden also provides $24 billion in corporate investment tax credits to these companies, digging out a small portion from a large cake for these technology companies. But is U.S. money so easy to obtain? Indian money can only be spent in India, and U.S. money may not even be given to you, but you still have to foot the bill for the grand promises made by the United States. According to a report by Global Times, TSMC has confirmed that the mass production of its factory in Arizona, USA, has been postponed from 2024 to 2025. Harry Harlan, head of technology for the Asia-Pacific region at JPMorgan Chase, stated that besides the confirmation, TSMC's construction of the factory in the United States still faces many risks, such as a shortage of skilled labor in the United States and difficulties in installing related equipment such as lithography machines. However, although TSMC's U.S. factory has broken ground, there has been no progress on the U.S. Chip Fund, and TSMC has not received the promised subsidies for building the factory. Nevertheless, the United States, under the pretext of improving transparency in the chip industry supply chain, demands that all companies applying for subsidies must disclose confidential information such as expected cash flow, production capacity, inventory, and orders. For this reason, Taiwan's media openly expressed suspicion that TSMC was ambushed by the United States. It can be said that while the United States is openly restricting the development of Chinese chip technology, it may also have hidden intentions to completely control these chip companies. However, the chip war waged by the United States against China is destined to fail. The United States believes it has calculated people's minds, thinking that by enacting the Chip and Science Act, it can completely bind chip giants like TSMC and Nvidia to its camp and isolate its opponents. The approach taken by the United States is, in fact, a product of unipolarization. The United States pursues a hegemonic policy and still considers itself as the hegemon on this blue planet, mistakenly believing that it is still living in a unipolar era after the Cold War. In reality, the world has long transitioned from a unipolar era to a multipolar era. The strategy pursued by the United States to exhaust its opponents by expanding technological blockades is already outdated. The United States believes that by decoupling high-tech companies in the United States and its allies from China, China will not be able to successfully develop chips on its own. However, this idea has been proven wrong. It is evident that even if the United States intensifies its measures to restrict chip exports to China, China will not be significantly affected in the end. Recently, the customs announced the import situation of chips in China for the first 3 quarters of this year. The import volume of chips decreased by 14.6% compared to the same period last year, and the import value of chips decreased by over $60 billion. Meanwhile, the production capacity of domestic chips continues to increase, and American chips are gradually facing a dilemma of having nowhere to sell. The data shows that the import volume of chips in China for the first 3 quarters of this year was 355.9 billion pieces, a decrease of over 60 billion pieces compared to the same period last year, while the import value of chips was $25.29 billion, a decrease of over $60 billion, representing a 19.8% decline in chip imports. From this data, it can be seen that the decline in the import value of chips in China is greater than the decline in the import volume of chips. This indicates that the quantity of high-end imported chips in China is decreasing at an accelerated pace. On the other hand, it also reflects the enhanced competitiveness of Chinese chips, which forces foreign chips to lower their prices, resulting in a greater decline in the amount of chip procurement in China compared to the import volume. The reduction in chip imports in China is attributed to the breakthroughs in Chinese chips. In recent years, China has been making efforts to innovate in the chip industry, continuously breaking through technological gaps. Storage chips, in particular, have dealt a heavy blow to American chips, with prices being halved in just over a year. Other chips, such as analog chips and 5G RF chips, have also made breakthroughs. Recently, it was revealed that 90% of the chips used in the 5G smartphones launched by Huawei are domestically produced, shocking the overseas market. This demonstrates the accelerated improvement of China's chip industry chain. The previous issue of American control over China's 5G RF chips for smartphones has also been resolved, proving that the breakthrough of Chinese chips is not mere rhetoric. The continuous decrease in chip imports in China undoubtedly poses a significant blow to the United States, the world's largest chip exporting country. Last year, China reduced chip imports by nearly 100 billion pieces, directly causing losses for multiple American chip companies. In the first quarter of this year, Micron suffered a staggering loss of $2.3 billion with a revenue of only $4 billion, while Intel, AMD, Western Digital, and others have also fallen into losses. Western Digital, in particular, sold itself to the Japanese company Kioxia due to its losses. This has shaken the U.S. technology industry because since the bursting of the Japanese economic bubble in the 1990s, it has mostly been American companies acquiring Japanese companies. Now, after more than 20 years, a situation has arisen where a Japanese company is acquiring an American company. The breakthrough in Chinese storage chips has shown the United States that its attempts to restrict and hinder China's development of advanced chips are futile. Therefore, recently, the United States suddenly issued an indefinite license to South Korean storage chip manufacturers, allowing them to massively purchase advanced chip equipment and expand their production capacity in Chinese factories. The United States hopes that South Korean chips, aiming to dominate the storage chip market, can suppress Chinese storage chips. The American chip company Qualcomm also plans to enter the arena without armor and drastically reduce prices in the fourth quarter of this year to attract support from Chinese smartphone manufacturers. Texas Instruments has also significantly reduced the price of analog chips from 70 yuan to 1 yuan, attempting to attract Chinese companies by offering low prices. This is in stark contrast to the continuous price increases over a year ago. The changing attitude of overseas chips towards China demonstrates that strengthening independent research and development of Chinese chips is the correct approach. The increasing self-sufficiency rate of domestically produced chips prevents overseas chips from arrogantly raising prices, forcing them to lower prices and seek buyers. These achievements will encourage China's chip industry to further enhance its independent research and development capabilities, in order to reduce dependence on overseas chips. Thank you for watching our video. After watching the video, how do you think about the development of chips in the world? You can put your opinions and ideas in the comments below. We will keep on uploading new videos, so your subscribe and likes will encourage us to create new videos.